Hello, in this video I'd like to talk about Popper's books. Popper viewed the book as being the defining object of Western civilization, and he published numerous books himself. Basically, if you line up all Popper's books together, you end up with a whole shelf full of books. Uh, However, conventionally understood, the amount of books he actually wrote was very few, and it's hard to tell what exactly constitutes a book in the traditional sense of a coherent, enclosed, well defined object or thesis or treaty. Often his works evolved from one to the next, and there's no clear sense of when a book sort of became another book, whether two volumes of a single book or whether it's a completely new book. So in that sense, Popper's works kind of, in a way, indicate his whole personality coming out in a certain way. Um, and this can be seen by the fact of his autobiography, Unended Quest. This book was often criticised of really being more about ideas than about his personal biography. I mean, he called it an intellectual biography. But in a real sense, intellectual pursuits, intellectual concerns were his life, were his personality. He emptied out his personality into his works, which is a very sort of profound patristic idea in a sense. So if we look at his earliest book, which basically two fundamental problems of the theory of knowledge, originally published. Well, originally it wasn't really published. It was published a bit later than it was written. It provided the basis of Logic of Scientific Discovery, his more famous book. So basically, Logic of Scientific Discovery is about, well, this is only half of what Popper had. In half of the manuscript was lost, so the other half eventually published as this, and in English after the Second World War, much later. Initially, it came out as Logic of Scientific Discovery, Logic der Forschung, very thick book, very large book, numerous pages, large appendix, and appendix just kept growing and growing and growing. So about a third of the book is actually appendix. And then the appendix kept growing to the extent that he later published three other books, basically dealing with the problems that arose out of this one. So even though Popper is very famous and well known for his Logic of Scientific Discovery, this was actually a really early work that one of his really demonstrates his really early sort of aggressive, ambitious thought, highly technical. Really, he's operating on all cylinders here. So it's a very well, it's profound, intellectual, difficult to digest, lots going on. It's the work of a young man, with a lot of energy and a lot of technical knowledge going into the book. So, but the book, it became his life's project, and it never really finished. And then he wrote the postscripts to that, Realism and the Aim of Science, for instance, that just kept going. And then we have other books, say Conjectures and Refutations, and another, well, one of his famous books. And this one really, it's really a continuation on this. It's really just a series of essays strung together. So the essays are strung together. And there's a section on politics in it as well, a little bit. He moves into liberalism, linking philosophy of science with liberalism. But it's not really, well, it's essays drawn together. It's not really sort of a coherent book. And a similar sort of thing applies for objective knowledge, an evolutionary approach. It's really a series of lectures he gave strung together. And that's kind of a common theme with Popper's works. They really evolved from it's really an evolving project. The works evolved from one product to the next, and there's no clear indication of when one train of thought has ended, one argument has ended, and the next one begins. I mean, in terms of there's an overlap in the content. Uh, Even insofar as when you look at some of the paragraphs in Logic of Scientific Discovery, and particularly in this earlier one, often the paragraphs and the chapters seem, thrown together in a way that you wouldn't consider appropriate for a published, work. And then he wrote some other interesting things, notably The Poverty of Historicism, which was also a series of essays. During the Second World War, he wrote, when he was in exile in New Zealand, Open Society and Its Enemies, 2 volumes that he regarded as his fighting book, his war effort, writing against the Nazis directly, but really, one of the main enemies was also communism and the Soviet system as well. So that was definitely a book. That was his fighting effort. But even still with that, 2 massive volumes, and over half of each volume is footnotes. And the Polish logician Alfred Tarski is referred to more in this than Karl Marx, even though Karl Marx is a target. So is it a book of logic? Is it a book of politics? I mean, it's really... I mean, it's advertised as a book of politics, but why would you refer to Alfred Tarski so much more than Karl Marx? It's strange. And then he wrote with John Eccles, The Self and Its Brain. This is another major book, a very interesting book, one that hasn't received as much attention as what it probably deserves. But even this is largely the result of conversations he had with John Eccles. So there's a very real sense in which his books are conversational, that there is a conversation going on throughout his works, that his works in a sense contain a living force. They are alive. When you read them, you feel a personality is writing these things and in a sense leaving them open. They're never fully closed. There's never his philosophy just kept evolving, even right until the last years of his life. Right, and towards the end of his life, he started to move in the tradition, focusing on ancient Greek thought, particularly the pre-Socratic Greek philosophy. And we get from that the posthumously published The World of Parmenides. But that's also a series of essays that were drawn together, and out of that we get this book. But it was really never intended to be a book. It's really a series of essays drawn together on Parmenides. That's actually very interesting, because when we consider the reintroduction of Parmenides into 20th century philosophy, we generally think of Heidegger. But Popper was also working on Parmenides, and the pre-Socratic philosophers, and really did a lot to bring them back, and had a lot of really interesting things to say about Parmenides as well. But really, a lot of that's really hasn't received a great deal of attention. So his later thought really hasn't received the kind of attention that I feel it deserves. If you're looking at Popper just of the logic of scientific discovery, you're really looking at Popper the young man, before the Second World War, before he left Vienna. It's kind of, and he kept writing right into his 90s, until, right into the end of his life, and he constantly had interesting things to say right up to the end of his life. Indeed, some of his most profound works is his engagement with pre-Socratic poetry and his translations of the poems of Xenophanes, Parmenides, this sort of thing. It's have a lot to offer. So in that sense, Popper's books, to isolate one book and try and distill Popper's thought is quite difficult because it is a project. It is his personality um, on the paper on the page, and really there is a lot to delve into. And he's one of these thinkers that once you get drawn in, there's just so much. He was just so prolific. Um, so that's basically a summary of one of the issues to do with Popper's works, and it creates a lot of hassles with referencing and this sort of thing as well, because there's numerous volumes, numerous different publications of these works, often slightly modified with different appendix added and different referencing and this sort of thing. So it does create a lot of scholarly difficulties writing on his works. However, saying that, I mean, there's a majorly prolific writer, and we really in the popular domain, he's really only known for a couple of books. Most of his books are generally not forgotten, but really don't receive the attention that perhaps they should. Yep. Thank you.